What are the first steps in Nordic gnosis? So, for instance, you got this inner call to the runes, to Nordic gods, you start to study mythology and practices. But actually, what should be the first steps where you start to practice Nordic magic? I am always confused about the access to the information, where you either get really too mainstream, a little bit Marvel-like ideas about Nordic mythology, or you already have these big, deep practices and people talking about things far deeper than beginner can understand. I will try to keep my ideas simple but not fully mainstream or as a product of some pop culture. So I can share my experience how I stepped into the Nordic gnosis. So first, of course, when you start to study some discipline, you start with, from the beginning, you start with the sources. And of course, with the Nordic mythology, it would be the Edda, with poetic Edda and the prose Edda, so the elder Edda or younger Edda. Of course, it's not the only source we have about Nordic paganism, however, the main. And we're not talking about just Nordic paganism, of course, we're talking also about Germanic. We can get a lot of information also from Cornelius Tacit, from his investigation on Nordic people, and of course Saxon grammatic, and also Icelandic sagas, the Song of Nibelungs and the Saga of Volsungs. So I think you can open just Wikipedia page of like Nordic mythology and get just a list of the sources. It's not that much of them anyways. So you can learn this information in a few months. You can read all these books and you get more or less full picture of what we have about Nordic and Germanic mythology. And it's important to understand that all the magic practices, we don't have that much of description of it. So mostly we have, of course, have Tacit. He described a lot about magic practices, but it also was a little bit shallow and it was very subjective, let's say. So actually, the main thing what we know about practicing runic magic, practicing the runic divination, it's restored knowledge. So of course we have a lot of sources in Edda, but it's not really enough to have that full working system as we have now. So a lot of things were done by contemporary magicians who are dedicated their lives to this research, and such are Freya Asvin, and she made some incredibly numerous work on investigating runes and restoring it and giving it us back, let's say. There is also Ralph Bloom, but he's a little bit more like on the surface. He's a bit having this more light approach to it, but also his way of presenting it is also easy understanding. And we have Edred Thorsson. He's also quite a deep researcher and gave us a lot about runes. So yeah, our knowledge of runic magic, of rune divination, of Elder Futhark is not really based on super ancient knowledge. So when you are in occultism, in magic in general, you get used to it that we get knowledge from the time of antique times, from Greeks, from Egypt, from Babylon. But here is not the case. Here everything is mostly restored. Doesn't make it less powerful though. Anyway, we can lean on some sources, but then again, even Edda, it's the medieval time, so yes, it's not that super ancient, even though we know that cults of Scandinavian gods are much older than Edda. So the latest discoveries found the stone with runic letters, which is over 2,000 years. It mostly was oral tradition, so it's not that much we have left which is described and engraved in history, unfortunately. But however, anyway, we are here and we have a lot to restore still. So you for sure, what I don't like personally in many magic or religious approach is dogma. And in Nordic gnosis, because it's not based on very ancient sources, there was no dogma. However, nowadays, when people are restoring their tradition, there is such religion as Asatru and Vanatru. True, it's the Nordic word, well, at least in Swedish language, for belief, and Asatru, it's like devoted to the Aesir, and Vanatru is devoted to Vanir, so it's two main families of gods, so Aesir and Vanir. Aesir, it's Odin, Loki, Thor, etc., and Vanir, it's Freya, Freyr, Njord, so it's another family of gods. So Asatru is the modern attempt to reconstruct the religion of Germanic tribes or Germanic people, and pretty successful. In Iceland and in Denmark, for instance, it already has official status of religion, as Vanatru is as well. In Sweden, Norway, I don't think yet, at least. But of course, in the beginning of 20th century, as every other European country, it was a wave of this romantic nationalism. Finland also had it, but we have this Kalevala here, so it was resurrection of Kalevala. But in Nordic countries and Germany, that was the idea of resurrecting this Asatru. And in 60s it became more official, so it became official religion, and movement is quite strong since that time. And it started to be more international as well. Even in Russia there is some societies of Asatru and Vanatru. The other thing that when you go to the Nordic gnosis, and the main thing of Nordic gnosis is of course runes, the gift of Odin. And if you will not avoid to study runes if you go to Nordic gnosis, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So, and I recommend those people who I named already, and Freya Asvin is probably the main beacon of this knowledge, for me at least. So, when you already know runes and how to make a divination, how to interpret them, then of course you get into the field of the magic, where you can actually do the runic practices. And there are two main lines where you can choose your path, is Galdr and Seid. So Galdr, or Gald, because Galdrar, it means like plural form of Gald. Gald is a singing spell, let's say. And one of the main ideas of this Gald is so-called 18 spells of Odin. So it's this way when you collect 3 runes from every. So if you divide first 9 runes of Futhark by 3, and the first rune of every 3 piece will make you a first Odin spell. And then the second, and then third, and so on. There's that old Futhark. Through the old Futhark, you collect 18 spells of Odin. And that's the first Gald. And you can, but the main idea of Gald is singing. So you have to sing it in a very high, pitch-high voice. You usually, I'm not really fan of Gald. I'm not really good on singing, even screeching. It is more than singing, but whatever. So the thing is that you make a little poem, usually like 7 lines, and you implement these runes into this poem of your intention, and then you sing it, and you influence the environment that way. So the mythology says us that you can influence all the weather, you can make a storm, you can calm down the storm, you can help a woman to give birth, you can protect your loved ones, and so on. And the other line of the Nordic magic is Seid, and Seid is it's a clearly shamanic tradition, and that was marginalized. So if you do Seid, it means that you are something unpleasant, antisocial, and a little bit outsider. So they didn't like people who, I mean, in the Viking Age, they didn't like people who do Seid. Partially, maybe, the academic says that maybe because when you do Seid, you go into shaman trance and use probably some mushrooms. So at that point, you are very vulnerable to aggression, and you don't make any use for war, so you can't be used as a warrior. That's why probably it makes you useless in the eyes of the Vikings. Possible also, but also there is a lot of controversy about how you color your runes, because one part of the Seid also is not just the shaman practices, but also when you do a runic spell, then you have to color it. And in the speech of the Toll, you can there is clearly said that you can color it with your blood and with your saliva or whatever, but also with a salmon. And the other thing, it's not just the simple salmon, it's the most powerful material to color your runes is the salmon of the hanged man. It's also reference, of course, to Odin, because Odin is a god of hanged men, and he was hanged himself, so so yeah, that's also was one of a controversial in Seid. Interesting fact that Odin actually knew how to make Seid. So Freya taught him to be a Seid magician. And here we start to talk about the queer nature of Odin. We start to talk about maybe he was non-binary, because Seid was associated with the homosexualism also, even though there is no really straight reference to it, but there is an idea behind it. But then you just remember what is the nature of Odin, or his obsession with knowledge. And in my opinion, if Odin sees some knowledge he can get, these such things that people would think that he's homosexual or queer or whatever will never bother him, because there is knowledge. So whatever, even if it's antisocial practice, if it's stigmatized, marginalized, or whatsoever, it's a piece of knowledge, and he will get it no matter what. And I think that's the main thing why he also was good in Seid, because it's just another way to investigate this universe and his own nature. And nevertheless, he can be queer as well. In many of stories, he was cross-dressed or whatever, and in Scandinavian mythology, they never gave that much attention about the queer things, and Loki was the mother of Odin's horse Sleipnir, for instance. So what I do, I don't do Gald, but I do my version of Seid, let's say. I don't hunt for semen of hanged men, of course, but what I do, shamanic travels, and I connected it to my magic practices and the way I create rituals, for instance. So it's more, I could describe my Seid more as a evocation than the Seid, but anyways, I believe that it's a Seid. Nobody can convince me otherwise. There is no clear instruction, there is no dogma, even though that Asatru and Vanatru wants to put a lot of rules over it. I believe that in personal gnosis is always more important. And the main practice, by the way, of Asatru and Vanatru is the celebration of Wheel of the Year. It has its own, it's not like, well, it's quite close to Wiccan Wheel of the Year, but the dates are a bit different, but the meanings of the Shabbats are quite the same. It's also 8 of them, and it's also restoration of modern times, so close to Wiccan tradition. So personal gnosis in practicing Seid, in my opinion, is anyways more important. So what I do, I start with worship, so it can be my own room and my altar, or I go to the forest or to the beach, and I do the bind rune of the name of God I want to be to connect, or the name of the world I want to travel to, like Niflheim, Utgard, Muspelheim. Well, Muspelheim is a difficult place to go, so don't go there without any really clear reason, because fire giants, they don't like visitors, just tell you. So it have to be really a reason behind you, and you have to be ready clearly answer why you came. So I do this bind runes, so I connect them in one rune. So it's like I make a sigil, and I bind rune, and I do my first. I clear the space, of course, maybe with some pentagram even. I know that some magicians don't like mixed traditions. I do mix them. So I do the pentagram ritual first, and then I open my space, I open my temple, and I do the offering. I sing like I say some hymns, some spells, and I like call the entity of the world or of the god with this rune I made. So I activate it mostly with my breath, sometimes with blood if it's really needed, but mostly breath. And so I just go into meditation and watch my cartoons, and I go into this shamanic trance without mushrooms though, but I think with them maybe would be more effective, I don't know. So I go into my shamanic trance, enjoy my cartoons, then I close the temple, I do banishing ritual, and that's it. So why is not Seid? I think it is Seid anyway. So this it gives me a lot. I did really made a lot of this traveling meditation, let's say, and I have my results. So I mean, in my opinion, personal gnosis. No, of course, I believe you should base your personal gnosis on some sources. But anyway, personal gnosis is most important than just some dogma. That's my belief, at least. So that's how you start, in my opinion. How you start to make your first steps into Nordic gnosis. And if you have questions, please ask. And if you have some ideas what videos I can make about this subject, I will be really grateful if you give me ideas of what you are interested to listen, what aspects of the Nordic gnosis you are interested in. Well, thank you for your attention, and hej då!